Hey everybody, Ian J. Malone here of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. We've got a great episode on tap for you tonight. Rob and I had a lot of fun with this one. That would be our conversation with one Mr. Casey Moores, which we're going to bring to you in just a second. But before we do that, I wanted to take a second to give you guys a quick little tip. And that is, if you ever wanted to know the true story behind the man, the myth, the legend, the character of Buff Orpington, stick around after the credits. We didn't get a chance to touch upon that in our interview with Casey. However, it did come up in conversation off the record and off the mic when our interview was done. And for anybody who's ever been in broadcasting, you know that a lot of times that's when the best stuff happens, when everybody's feeling loose and off the record. Just so happened that we were still rolling tape. And so I went back and listened to it. It's some great stuff in there. And so I messaged Casey and said, hey man, I know this wasn't a part of your interview, but I'd sure love to take this little bit of sound to the fans. He said, go right ahead, dude. Do it to it. So I polished it up and I'm going to plug it in at the end of this episode. So if you're ever curious as to who Buff Orpington is in the Four Horsemen Universe, then stick around after the credits and you will hear it straight from the lips of one of the creators of that character themselves, Mr. Casey Moores. But in the meantime, how about we get to the episode, shall we? The following is a production of Shark Flight Media. Shark Flight Media. Shark Flight Media.
Now entering the nexus of geekery and guy world in 3, 2, 1. Mark.
Hello, IT. Have you tried turning it off and on again?
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
This is the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast.
Hey kids, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. I am your host, Ian J. Malone. Going to be joined shortly by my good friend, Rob Howell. Hoping to be joined later on tonight by Kevin Steverson, but life kind of got in the way, so he may or may not drop in for our pod mail segment. We've got an open vine out to him. Also got a fantastic guest interview tonight that we're really excited to bring to you. But before we get to all of that, let's gotta pay some bills. Thank our presenting sponsor. That would, of course, be Chris Kennedy Publishing. Doesn't matter what you're into, folks. I swear this is going to get better, guys. Just stick with me, please. Doesn't matter what you're into, folks. If it's military, sci-fi, space opera, urban fantasy, paranormal romance, post-apocalyptic, stuff on the craft, they've got it all right over at Chris Kennedy Publishing. Why? Because they are message-free sci-fi with a shot of rock, or a shot of, oh God, Rob. Like I am bombing on this episode worse than Jay frickin' Moore, who I saw at a comedy club out on the beach last weekend. That dude is somewhere crawled up in a bottle right now. I mean, when you open your show with, so I've starred in a whole bunch of movies and I've been on Hollywood and I've worked with Clint Eastwood and tons of stars. And now I'm here at a taco shack talking to you freaking people in the Panhandle. I was just kind of like, boy, this is really going to go downhill from here.
Yeah. So I have to ask you a very on-topic question then. So I say, have you tried turning yourself off and then on back again?
That's a valid question right there. I have heard that somewhere before. Somewhere that ringy-ding-dings a bell. So, how's life treating you, man? You are kicking it on the Carolina shore, if I am not mistaken.
I am. I am looking out at a sunset over Currituck Sound in the Inner Banks, looking out at the Outer Banks. On a glorious evening here. It's in the upper 60s, low 70s, not a cloud in the sky. Contrails from, aircraft probably coming from Norfolk Air Station or something like that.
Yeah.
But, it's a beautiful day. There's a bunch of buddies that are here already at FactoryCon, and we're going to have a lot of fun in spite of the fact you're not going to be here, Ian.
Yeah, I know. I hate that. I was really looking forward to that trip, too. I really was. But, moved to Florida. I burned up all my annual leave at work, and it is what it is. But I'm definitely rain checking for that one next year. That's a beautiful part of North Carolina. This time of year, I'm sure the weather is gorgeous. What is it, like 72 out right now?
It's 69, 70, something like that. I'm sitting out in the these KOA campgrounds, and I guess I'm going to be advertising for them for the moment. They have these little cabins that are full kitchen, full bathroom, couple of bedrooms, and then they have a little screened-in porch. And I'm sitting on the porch talking to you 1,000 miles away. It's brilliant. I love it.
Nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful area, man. I very much enjoyed visiting that part of North Carolina when I lived up there. A lot of really cool stuff to go do in the Outer Banks, folks. If you're ever in that area, you've got the Wright Brothers Museum there at Kitty Hawk, which is aptly where the plane got its name. You've got lots of great dining. There's a little joint in Duck, North Carolina down there called the Roadside Grill. That's probably the best like farm to fork seafood type of joint I've ever eaten at. Really, really good stuff. They've got a Carolina Metal that's like, think of it as like a southern take on San Francisco Cioppino, kind of like a fish stew in a tomato base type of a thing. Really, really, really good stuff. Lots of great beer. And if you make sure, I don't know, Rob, if you fancy yourself a rum guy, but make sure you go score at least a drink, if not a bottle, of Kill Devil rum. That is named for the city of Kill Devil, the town of Kill Devil Hills, kind of earns its name from that whole pirating lore of, we make rum so strong that it would kill the devil. That was what the pirates used to say. That's what the locals used to say. And so that is aptly what the name of their rum is. But very, very good stuff. They've got a pecan brown sugar rum that's really to die for. So go forth and enjoy and spill some on the bar for me.
I sure will.
But all right, well, we've got another great guest on tonight. I don't know how this happens, man, but it seems like we are just inundated lately with freaking pilots from the Air Force. I mean, how did that happen? Rob, who are we talking to tonight?
We're talking to Casey Moores, who might actually be a pilot in the Air Force.
Hey!
But let's let him tell us about himself first. Come on, Casey, tell us, introduce yourself, and including what you've written.
Yeah, hi, I'm Casey Moores. Actually, I am technically a retired Air Force pilot as of a year ago, but I spent 20 years in rescue and special operations C-130s. As I like to say, I've spent all that time flying in those places with those people doing those things that you sometimes do or don't hear about, that, sometime about 25 years from now, I'll gladly tell people openly. But for now, I've been translating that to fiction, pretending that these are fictional things and working them in my stories. I've been primarily writing for the Four Horsemen Universe over the course of several different anthologies. I've got numerous books out there. As of the last month, it's now multiple books. I'm kind of proud of that. I got several fantasy stories out there that I think we're going to get to later on that Rob Howell's been putting out there, Songs of Valor and Talons and Talismans. We'll get to that. That is set in a specific fantasy setting I'd like to expand on someday. I actually have another story in the Heart's Enchantment anthology that was self-published by Jenny Posthumus back in 2020. I got my first writing credit in the Storming Area 51 anthology that J.R. Hanley put out back in September of 2019, back when they were supposed to have stormed Area 51. Not that really panned out, but you can read about what might have happened. And I've also, with Three Ravens Publishing, I got into the JTF 13 world. I've got a story of Civil War Marines hunting monsters early on in the Civil War. Hopefully that'll be coming out sometime, probably at the end of November. And I look forward to expanding that universe as well.
Awesome. How did you get it? I mean, it's a bunch of projects. How did you get in the writing in the first place?
I'd like to largely blame Casey Azell. She's the sort of person that makes people do things, as she likes to say. But she had sort of, sent out the feeler. Hey, Casey, would you like to write? Way back in the day, we wrote stories back together back in our, back in the early 2000s. Just, fun stuff, playing off of role-playing, RPGs that we played. Then she got serious into writing over the course of the last decade. And about the time that I was finishing up my last assignment in England before I moved back to the States, I read Cartwright's Cavaliers. I went to DragonCon. I sat in on the Four Horsemen panel at DragonCon, and at that panel, I sort of crafted a story in my head. And then I spent the entire, I think, 28-hour drive reviewing it, revising it. And then when I came home over the course of a 2-day weekend, I cranked that story out. It was the first thing I'd really written over the last decade, the previous decade. And
which anthology did that come out in?
It hasn't. That's kind of the joke. It was, a very rough first story. But I subsequently wrote, Casey asked me for a story for her Deepak anthology. I reached out to Kevin Eikenberry trying to revise that very first story that I wrote. And instead of helping me, he sort of helped me with that, but he also helped me sort of stretch out and get further into the Four Horsemen universe. He asked me for a story for Set the Terms. That became Recovery. And Casey Azel's Deepak anthology Negotiation, I wrote Blind Fury, about a blind samurai who's actually the target of a Deepak contract. Hilarity ensues. Those two characters wound up back in Mess with the Bull in a fairly prominent role. And actually, the story that I wrote for Kevin Eikenberry in the Set the Terms, Recovery, one of the characters is referenced by some of the other characters in Mess with the Bull as well. So I've sort of tied everything back in to most of my main my novels. The next thing that I wrote, the very next story that I wrote after writing what has become the Croatoans, and I'll get back to where that's going. The next story I wrote was called The Mushroom Farm, which was basically a Sante raid redux. And in that story, I created a character named Bull. And he has become the main character that I've been writing about in the Four Horsemen universe. He is sort of my take on the nebulous, shadowy Spec Ops character from history. I think there's been several Black Ops or Special Ops leaders in the U.S. military history named Bull. And like I said, I wrote These Things We Do as the background to that entire character, and now one of my newest novels, Mess with the Bull, centers entirely on him in the current timeline of the Four Horsemen universe. Tying all of this back to that very first story, Robert Hampson has asked me to partake in the next Rogel novel, and I sent him that as an idea of something that we could work with, and he just decided to take that story wholesale, asked me to revise it a little bit to fit his novel better, and that entire story is actually going to be a part of the next Rogel novel. So
nice.
I had actually written that entire story off as something that I did when I was, a new writer, had no idea what I was doing. Actually reviewing it, I cringed at some of the things I did with that. I was head hopping, jumping around, things like that, bad tenses. But, after cleaning it up a little bit, that story will now actually exist in the Four Horsemen universe in the near future.
Excellent.
So that's a long story as to how I got into writing, but there we are.
Every writer does that cringe thing. I mean, we all get better and look at our old stuff and go, well, man, I can do it. Oh, man. So my next question that I had on my list was, about your experiences piloting and how you had incorporated them into your stories. But I suspect your answer is going to be, well, then I redacted, and then I redacted, and in the process of redacting. But if you've got anything you can tell us about, some of your piloting stories that isn't still under some of those restrictions, please go ahead. What are some that you've put into your stories?
That's actually the fun part. I can definitively say that, yes, I have used some of my experiences over the course of my rescue and special ops career, directly related them in. And as I said, the easy thing is you turn it into fiction, and then you can neither confirm nor deny. And everything that I have written is probably based on something that I've done, but you can have a fun time proving it. Sometimes it's small details. redacted. Yeah, sometimes it's small details, like in my In the Wing story, the audition. I worked in a piece where the pilot has to porpoise the airplane, which is basically just like jam the controls forward and after to sort of wobble the plane until the ramp closes. That's something we'll have to do in the C-130 from time to time. So sometimes I put in little pieces like that and just throw them in there. Sometimes it's actual operations that I've been on that I play off of. Outside of that, one of the things that I was doing early on in the Four Horsemen, like with the Mushroom Farm and reenacting the Sante raid, and actually I turned this into a joke and Mess with the Bull, I like to use old special operations, specifically ones that involve C-130s, sometimes even ones that I have some sort of connection to. Grumble, redacted. But so in the Mushroom Farm, I recreated the Sante raid, and These Things We Do, I sort of gave an homage to Operation Eagle Claw, Desert One, the big disaster in the desert trying to get the hostages out of Iran. That's how I destroyed the original version of the company, and these things we do is with a redux of that. In Mess with the Bull, I kind of make fun of it and have one of the characters asking Bull, so which one is it going to be this time? And he's like, what do you mean? It was like, when you saved these people, you used that operation. When you saved those people, you used that operation. So what are you doing today? And then he names one, and the other character is like, oh, this is nothing like that. And he's like, well, it's kind of a stretch. I've done a lot of these. I'm trying to find what I don't have much to work with anymore. I'm running out of ideas. Leave me alone.
All right. So, what's the average flying speed of an unladen C-130?
What do you mean, a C-130E or a C-130J? Is it an MC-130J or an HC-130J or just a slick C-130J?
I'll accept that answer. I was waiting for African or European.
An African or a European C-130?
So, what's the best advice you've gotten as a new writer?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think one of the best concepts I got is that, and I've gotten this from several different ways. Several people have suggested, just keep writing. Don't stress over the quality necessarily until you go back and you re-edit. The fact that you write it and get it done, that can always be edited and fixed. You can't edit something that you didn't write. So, it's sort of like, to put it in a military term, the perfect is the enemy of the good. A lot of authors never finish writing what they're writing because they think that they have to make it perfect, that they have to make it wonderful, that they have to be J.K. Rowling, who isn't. If you go back, there is no perfect, and definitely not the first time around.
Yeah, I'm sure if she looks at Sorcerer's Stone now, I mean, she probably goes, "Oh man, I'm so much better than I was then," and cringes at stuff. So yeah, that's a great point. So what else?
So that's it. Girl Casey and Chris Kennedy would say, produce, 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 just keep writing. The advice I got from Ike and Barry was to just get to a point where you can type the end, and then you can go back and maybe have several revisions. And I saw that when I was writing these things we do. I sort of forced myself across the finish line. I got to the end, and then I went back through, I'm going to say 5 or 6 revisions, because that was my first novel. It was very rough. It took a lot of work to get where it got. When I got through my second novel, I sent it to the editor expecting, the 6 pages that I got for these things we do. And it came back and it was a couple paragraphs of advice. And I was like, that's it? Where's the rest of it? So in going through that exercise and taking that journey and just, forcing yourself to produce and write and get it out there, the learning, the development that happens as long as you're letting it. I see. I'm going to jump to your next question as to what's the worst advice. And I'm not sure if I got this from anybody particularly, but it's a sense that I got out there. A lot of people want to focus on the writing and not worry about the marketing. And I'll say those of us who write for Chris Kennedy can be spoiled to a certain extent because we know that he's going to handle a lot of the marketing and putting it together and getting it out there and making sure that it is heard and seen and published. And but in that same token, he's the first one to get on you about what you're doing to market yourself, and it's an excellent point.
Have you started a mailing list?
Yeah. Have you started a mailing list? Do you have a Facebook page or a web page? Are you paying?
Do you have an Amazon author page?
Do you have an Amazon author page? Are you uploading your books to those pages? He'll get on you about that. And so the worst advice are the authors out there that it's usually the newer authors. It's the sense that they have that I'm going to focus on writing because I want to be a good writer and I want to put out good product, which is valid, but you're not going to get anywhere. The world is not going to see your work unless you put the work into marketing yourself, going on podcasts like this, getting those pages and sending out those emails.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the long-term business strategy. So, yeah, you said something in there I think is really important. One of the things I've been talking about of late is that for me, I noticed that I don't gather the experience points, that I don't actually get to, use them and level up until after I finish the story and put it away for a month or a week or a few days. But it has to be finished. And just the process of saying the end, even if I plan on going back and editing it, the leveling up happens somewhere in there. But if you don't ever get to the end of it, you never really at least I haven't really leveled up at any point in time. So I think that's a really good point you made.
Yeah.
What would you do differently about if you started your career now?
I assume you mean my writing career.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
Not choose C-130s. No.
I'll be honest. That's a little bit of a tough one. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm still new enough. Then I'm kind of happy with what I've done and where I've gotten. So early on, I thought it was very important to reach out to sort of sign on to whatever anthology calls I got there. If anybody was saying that they were doing anything, I would raise my hand and say yes, the way that I was taught in the Air Force not to volunteer because that's the horrible idea. But somehow I moved past that right off the bat and said and went looking for those opportunities, and not all of them, financially or successfully or marketing wise panned out, but I'm still happy that I did them. So to be honest, I'm not really sure I would change all that much about how I went about starting my writing career. I got kind of lucky because I was able to jump into Chris Kennedy's world and write stories for him. But, I was also just sort of being part of that community, got some other opportunities that I'm still very happy with. So at this point, I'm not really sure I have any complaints. It's just a matter of I hope I haven't overloaded myself, which it comes in big waves. And just as you catch your breath from one wave, you see the next one looming over you. And that's sort of where I am now. I had a little bit of a lull over the last few months. I had these big pushes to finish Mess with the Bull, and then I was finishing Unshackled. And then I had 3 short stories to crank out for Salvage Universe, for Fallen World, and for Talons and Talismans. And then I stopped to take a breath, and here I am a few weeks later having taken that breath and behind in the project that I should be working on and kind of struggling to get myself back in the groove. But
I actually am going to quibble with you there because one of the things you say in there is that you're behind. And I will tell you, it's one of the things I've talked about with the writers on New Mythology, and you've heard me say it probably. If you finish a novel or you finish a major project, you have to understand that that's a reason that you need to take a breath. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit longer breath this time than you wanted. But if you finished 2 novels back to back and then threw a bunch of short stories, that's a reason for you to take a breath and recatch your spark because you can easily go too far. So when you say you're behind on a project, maybe that's true, but maybe you would be farther behind if you hadn't taken a break. So just be aware that taking a break isn't necessarily a bad thing. Being lazy is a bad thing, but understanding where you're.
Yeah, I get that, and I I intentionally took a break for a little bit, but now, like I said, I'm having trouble spooling back up, I guess.
Yeah, energy, change. It's hard sometimes. So you mentioned Mess with Bull and Unshackled. Go ahead and talk about those 2 new projects.
Well, going back to my first novel, These Things We Do, it was my first novel. Like I said, it started off, the original version was very rough. And even the final product, I'll admit, is a little bit disjointed. It's really 4 entirely different novels. I don't introduce my main character until the second part. And then there's 3 very distinct parts to to Bull's character progression at that point. So I was also trying to go back and catch the readers up on this character that I created in the Mushroom Farm, and I just had to write the backstory to Bull and how he got to be who he is. But that was also sort of irrelevant to the Four Horsemen universe, and I wanted to catch back up. So I came up with the idea of Mess with the Bull, which is the operation that Bull embarks on immediately after the events in the Mushroom Farm, where he saves the regulators from experimentation by an Eagle Rovgal under the masterminding of a Vitanho. And it's their next operation to go basically it runs concurrent with the Omega Wars, so it's still just a little bit behind the current timeline, but it's Bull going out to save another unit that's been trapped, with the caveat being that this was actually a very intentional setup to capture Bull. It's the same entity that destroyed the company in the first place, not necessarily the same exact person, but it was the same entity that destroyed the company in the first place when Bull went out solo and recreated it in these things we do. That same entity destroyed the intergalactic haulers as part of a long-term plan, and that same entity is now trying to destroy Bull and the company. Bull walks into it being fairly certain that it's a trap, but he doesn't know who said it, and he decides he's going to walk into it just to spring it and see what he can do about it. So the entire thing is Bull trying to do what he does, find out what he can find out, play the game as best he can. His adversary on the other side trying to counter every move that he makes. And it's all coming down to, when is Bull going to enact his plan so that the adversary can enact theirs, and whose contingencies are going to be better, whose plans are going to be more complex and better detailed, and who's going to win in the end. So I'll leave that hanging for Mess with the Bull. Now, the thing about Mess with the Bull, when I originally envisioned it, for some strange reason, I was again going to break it into two entirely different parts. I was going to have one novel where Bull was going to have his operation in the first half, and then the second half was going to be this in-depth, detailed defense of the moon that he takes over at the end of these things we do, which he has now named Tambu. So I realized by the time that I was planning to do 50,000 words for each of these two sections, and sometime around 65,000 words, realizing I had a lot left of what became Mess with the Bull, I realized that it should always have been obvious to me once I saw it in those terms, but it was always going to be two entirely different novels because Bull's not even in the second one. At that point, I was somewhat I thought that I might need help with the second part, so I reached out to Jamie Ibsen to see if he'd be interested in collaborating on a novel with me. And we started talking about what the defenses on Tambu might look like, who would be there. We decided we were going to pull in one of his favorite characters from Gunboat Diplomacy, Roxandra Roxtador, a Pushtal, who's sort of a secret agent spy in that novel. And this is most of the time that humans have been operating in a galaxy later. So she's, I think, somewhere around 80 years past this, to be honest, because Gunboat Diplomacy takes place shortly after the Alpha contracts and around the time that Hrant Golram, the Enforcer, is on his first real mission as an Enforcer. So she has now been everywhere. She's done everything. Bull has put her in charge of the defense of Tambu. We don't really go into the details as to how they met, why they're involved, and why she was chosen to basically be the custodian of Tambu while Bull is away. Hopefully we can develop that in the future. There is a plan. We do know how that happened, but we're still working on whether or not we're going to put that into a novel or a story or something further back at some point. Anyway, she's there. She's bored. She has nothing to do. There's this overarching system program named Lucille that is overseeing all the everything that happens on Tambu, making her feel pretty useless. Every time she's the initial sequence is her going around the station, checking on things, looking into this or that, and everywhere she goes, Lucille is popping in with unsolicited details, basically telling her that everything is handled and she doesn't need to worry about everything. And she's like, well, I kind of want to worry about something. Isn't something going wrong? I kind of want to deal with some kind of problem. In the meantime, one of my characters from these things we do, Melissa, named after one of our friends, she tells Roxandra that there's a Christmas party going on, thrown by 3 Flatar, who are affectionately named the Chipmunks, and yes, they are called Alvin, Simon, and Theodore. They are throwing a Christmas party because one of the characters in Mess with the Bull told them that they better throw a party while they're gone. Bull said no parties, and this other character, Archie, said you'd better throw a Christmas party. They're more afraid of her, so they threw a Christmas party. A lot of hilarity there. Yes, they sing the Christmas song over the course of that party. They play Die Hard in the background. I never name it as such, but that's basically what's going on because the Chipmunks have decided that that is the essential Christmas movie. And while this is all happening, they come under attack by unknown forces. They quickly resolve the Science Guild. It's this massive sneak attack with massive missiles. Everything's going wrong in a hurry. They send in hordes, I'm not going to spoil it, of invaders and assaulters, and in no time, It's reduced to Roxandra, a handful of, as we say, science experiments that were basically the some of the characters from Mushroom Farm who were experimented on by a Rogel. They've been modified in strange ways. They keep themselves out of the bunkers where everybody goes into hiding because they want to deal with it. The chipmunks find their way back out, and so these three small bands of unlikely heroes, well, except for Roxandra, he's a very likely hero, but these three bands of ne'er-do-wells wind up facing down this massive threat by themselves. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm going to be the selfish promoter of New Mythology Press here. You have two great stories, one in Songs of Valor, one in Talents and Talismans. You say you have another story in one of Jay Posthumus's anthologies, but it's set in an interesting World War I inspired fantasy setting. And tell us about that setting, and when are you getting me a novel in that world?
Yeah, I talked to you about that looming wave on the horizon. I'm currently helping with a novel. Once I get past that, I've got another novel I'm going to write for the Fallen World. I've got a novel I'm going to write for somebody else entirely. Mark Wandry asked to co-write a novel in the Four Horsemen Universe about the origins of the Phoenix dropship. I've got several short stories I'm going to have to put over the next month. So this is definitely the project that I want to circle myself back around to and focus on at some point. When that's going to be, I really can't tell you. I really want to get there. This is definitely what I want to be doing. More than all the other. I mean, I love everything that I've come up with, everything that I'm planning to write, but this is the passion project that I'd like to work myself back around to.
All right, as long as it's not all about spiders.
No, that's actually entirely a one-off. That's kind of the funny part. All the other stories, and actually I should be pushing you another one in the near future.
For the Fantasy Anthology?
Yes. And I understand that having gotten 2 stories past you already, I know that I'm on a higher grading curve now. But,
yes, you are.
We'll see what happens.
You earned it because you're a good writer. So sucks to be you, but there you go.
Yeah. So going all the way back to the Heart's Enchantment anthology that Jenny Posthumus put out, for that, it was supposed to be a romance and sort of a romantic. It had the way she phrased it was supposed to be a romantic element. So naturally, I decided to write about a necromancer on the front lines of this World War I setting, because what's more romantic than that? I tie in a backstory where she has a romantic relationship with the captain, who subsequently calls her to the front to see if she can win the war for them. So that's one of the characters that I would like to develop if I can ever advance this world. We have a sister. I have a concept that's sort of along the lines of Harry Turtledove alternate histories, in that it's going to follow several different characters as this war starts and progresses and develops in multiple different ways, changes drastically several times. I've got it spelled out. I just have to get there. My character from Songs of Valor, from A Quaint Pastime, the gnome pilot Wizlig. That's another character. That was one of the original characters I created when I first dreamed up this world, was that character. And so I figured I would come in guns blazing for that last Fantasy contest, because that was one of my favorite characters, and I figured he was going to try and bring a dragon to the front lines of this war. And what's cooler than, World War I biplane air combat with drakes and dragons, and where can you go wrong?
Yeah, and magic flying everywhere. Yeah, it's a great story. That's awesome.
I loved writing that one, and I was very honored that got selected.
So given the schedule you're telling me, it looks like I can put it on the schedule for announcing, for releasing it at Fantasy, right? You should have it to me by the end of December, right?
Yeah, as soon as I invent the technology that creates 5 more of me that I can lock in a closet and tell them to write while I go to work and hang out with the family and do all those things. You remember Multiplicity with I think Michael Keaton? Yeah.
I totally
there you
love
go.
the fact that we just had a multiplicity reference on this show, by the way.
You're welcome.
She touched my peppy, Steve.
It's either that or the alternate dimension where time has no meaning, where I can go quietly and write.
So we're going. We've covered quite a bit of stuff, and I was going to ask a different question, but it looks like I have a special question here that just sort of popped up on my screen, and I really have to ask you this one before we let you go. So in this bonus question, you're the second Casey who's a pilot in the Air Force we've interviewed lately. Which is the better one? Understand, if need should arise, we'll give the other plenty of time for rebuttal.
Yeah, and I'm sure she will take it and expound in detail. Yeah. Not going to touch that one. What happened to the Buff Orpington question? I want the Buff Orpington question.
I skipped past
Redacted.
it to throw you under the bus.
My Fifth Amendment rights. I'm under duress. Can I have a glass of water? I'd like to speak to my leadership. Can I speak to my leadership?
I actually did kind of want to circle back in and ask something that you touched upon really at the start of the interview here. It's fitting that Rob and I opened up talking about North Carolina and North Carolina history and rum and all that good stuff. And yet you threw out the word Croatoans. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah. So my first story that I wrote way back when is supposed to be, I'm still unclear as to whether or not this is Chris Kennedy approved, so this is not canon until it is published.
Okay.
And some of the details might have to be adjusted, but my concept was that there was a colony that went out with those alpha contracts, a company that went out with those alpha contracts, went to some distant planet, and the contract being to defend the construction of basically an outpost where they could then launch pirate hunting sorties from. Everything got destroyed and obliterated. They found themselves stranded on this moon, and they have now survived for 100 years, building, developing, eventually taking over their system, but having no way to access the Stargate, whose crew was murdered at some point over the last 100 years before they could access it. So they've been stranded in some system for 100 years, growing and developing. And so I considered them the lost colony, and I named them the Croatoans.
Nice.
Now, on a completely different note, tying back to my JTF-13 novel, Witch Hunt, with Three Ravens should be publishing sometime in November, my Civil War Marines just happened to go to Roanoke Island as well. And they're actually just across a sound from Kill Devil Hill, and they actually make reference to it. Or from Kill Devil, Kitty Hawk. And they make reference to it while they're there. And they mention the fact that there are that there was a lost colony on this island, that there was actually a battle in the Civil War that Marines were a part of on Roanoke Island.
Cool. Well, if you go to expound on that story down the line, which it sounds like you probably will, might I recommend a little book called Colonies Lost from a guy named Ian J. Malone, who did quite a bit of research into that story of the lost colony of Roanoke Island. That's still to this day one of the favorite things I've ever done, just because that's such a cool and compelling story. And for anybody who's not familiar with
I've
that,
used it twice, as we just discussed.
yeah, for anybody who's not familiar with that, just run a Google search for Lost Colony of Roanoke, and go nuts with YouTube videos. History Channel's done a number of different specials on it. Just a really cool story, one of the great mysteries in New World American history. So, all right,
Yeah,
Casey,
we'll look into that.
Casey Moores, we greatly appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's been an absolute treat and a thrill having you here. Before we let you get out of here, though, tell folks where they can find you, where can they meet you on social media, where can they get information on your books, where are you on the interwebs?
The best place to find me is on my website, www.caseymoores, that's CASEYMOORES.net. That's where you can get the links to all my publications, the occasional blog that I put in there, going back, usually Dragon Con after action reports, but I got some other things in there. You'll also get a link to my mailing list, and you can also find me on Facebook under Casey Moores Writer. I'm active in all the Chris Kennedy publishing pages as well. If you look into Amazon, you can find Casey Moore's, but just make sure that you correct it after it tells you that you meant Casey Moore 'S. You have to retype, no, I meant Casey Moore's with an S at the end, all one word. My phone still autocorrects my name. The S that's at the end of my name makes my name unspellable, unfindable, and unpronounceable to 90% of the population of the world.
Hooray, autocorrect. Hooray.
Yeah, that helped a little drunk elf.
Casey Moore's, ladies and gentlemen. He's got books and he's got jokes. Go find him on CaseyMoores.net. Track him down on Facebook. Ask him questions. He's a wild and crazy and a very personable guy. So, Casey Moores, thanks for coming and hanging out on the show, man. We appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, that's going to bring us down to the bottom of the hour, which is where we take a second to throw a little bit of news and notes out with what's happening with our presenting sponsor. Let's see if I can get through it this bloody time. Chris Kennedy Publishing. If you want to know more about them, go to that fabulous website that is chriskennedypublishing.com. You can learn all about their authors, their series, their books, new releases, sign up for the mailing list, get free ebooks. I mean, come on. It's just there's tons of fun to be had over there at chriskennedypublishing.com. Why? Because they are message-free sci-fi with a slice of fantasy. Stuck it. All right. New releases this week. I got all ahead of myself and I didn't pull up my notes. All right, what do we got?
It's the little victories, Ian.
New release this week is Infiltration. That would be Murphy's Lawless Mission Critical Book 1. So new stuff from the Murphy's Lawless series with Griffin, Barber. Rob, what's this book about, man?
Well, taken from their planet and their century, they are the Lost Soldiers. Determined to become a better person in his truly out-of-this-world fresh start, Horace Earl Chalmers' background in investigation, interrogation, and sniffing out problems has made him Major Roger Young Murphy's de facto counterintelligence expert. But Chalmers has a problem. The instincts, memories, and habits he accrued over a lifetime spent dodging and manipulating the laws he was ostensibly following and upholding are still with him. And the desperation of their circumstances on Urbach, the world where the lost soldiers have been marooned, isn't making his vow to be better any easier. He does, however, have the support of his trusted partner, Sergeant James Jackson, and a new friend and enforcer, Sergeant Max Messina, as they try to find a way to get into the enemy-held downport, the only means of access to orbit. More importantly, it's also the only place to steal the ship required for Murphy's critical three-part operation to defeat the rapacious Colcian overlords who have arrived to strip the planet of its precious natural resources. Can Chalmers, with the help of his friends, use his old skills for good this time? If he can't, the lost soldiers known as Murphy's Lawless won't have the assets necessary to beat the Colcians in space. And if they can't beat them there, it's just a matter of time before the lost soldiers not only lose everything they've accomplished and built, but their lives as well.
All right. What are the people saying about this one?
Well, let's see here. First of all, if I'm going to be doing, my impression of Kevin Steverson, I'm going to be like, well, the people are saying that the Georgia Bulldogs have a good football team, and Joe.
We love you, Kev, but we weren't going to not let that go. That is a good freaking team, though.
It is a good freaking team. Joe says, this short book is a good addition to the main story of the men and women lost out of time and place in another star system. Urbach is getting hotter as the twin suns do their thing, and Colonel Murphy, Chalmers, and Jackson don't have a lot of time to arrange for their survival. Well written and tense, but funny. It was entertaining. John says, can one redeem oneself from being a bit of an a-hole? Read up and see. This continues the journey of the individuals and the rest of Murphy's Lawless. Different characters intertwine, but the real story in this one is, can Chalmers become a better man? Overall, another great read in one of my favorite series. Chris says, as the fight progresses, Murphy calls on Chalmers to step up and assist in the next step of the master plan. Working alongside others, can he redeem himself and show that he is not useless? Bold steps are taken, and trust may be misplaced.
Nice. All right. Well, the only thing better than one new release on the week is having two new releases on the week. And we do indeed have a second new release for this week, and that comes to us in the form of Fresh Fruit and Ammo by Piatt. This is the third installation of Paul's Abner Fortis ISMC series. A lot of buzz about this series, guys. A lot of really good buzz about this series. Paul's a great writer. He and I actually hooked up on MeWe a while back and have kind of started to get to know each other a little bit. Guy's got some real talent, man, and these books are coming out fast and furious. So if you have not had a chance to check that out, folks who are fans of the 4HU, the MilSF world, Abner Fortis ISMC, man, definitely go check that out. But again, this week's new release comes to us from that series, and that would be Fresh Fruit and Ammo, so go check that out. Pre-releases this week would be Just in Time for Halloween, and Then It Got Weird, which is a new anthology of sort of paranormal peculiarities, if you will. And this is going to be edited by Jamie Ibsen, also co-creator of the whole Buff Orpington thing that we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier. We've got to get Casey back to talk about that on another interview, by the way. I hate that we didn't get to that, but that's some stellar stuff. Folks, if you don't know what we're talking about, seriously, go onto Facebook and run a search for Buff Orpington. It's fabulous. So, but anyway, Jamie Ibsen, he has an anthology coming out. It's Just in Time for Halloween, and Then It Got Weird. So be sure you go check that out. New out in audio, a little book called The Street Survivors by some dude named Ian Malone and this really good writer named Chris Kennedy. So that is the 12th book in the Guild Wars. We're really happy with the way the narrator folks did this one. I mean, it's right in there with all the other 4HU stuff. So a lot of big things happening in this story for those who have not had a chance to read it. There's some stuff there's some seeds we plant in this story that I can tell you, having just finished the follow-up to this book, big stuff, man. Big things. And it all started with the groundwork that we laid in The Street Survivors, which is now out in audio. So go grab that. Let's see here. Deal of the week. I just mentioned the Abner Fortis series. Well, check it out. If you want to start it, now's the time. Book one in that series is called Cherry Drop. Again, that's from Piatt, Paul as we know him. And that is 99 cents this week. So if you're looking for some weekend reads, can't beat Cherry Drop for $1. And then finally, launch team readers are now needed for the second book in the Murphy's Lawless Mission Critical series. So if you are interested in checking that one out, that is going to be by Chris Kennedy. It's called Insertion. It's going to release November 19th. If you're interested in getting an early peek at that, join the launch team. Go to chriskennedypublishing.com, go to the Contact Us stuff, shoot them a message, let them know that you're interested in checking that out, and they can throw you onto that. So that's what's happening in the wonderful world of Chris Kennedy Publishing. Why? Because they're message-free sci-fi with a slice of fantasy. All right, segment 2. Let's see here. Talk about some... all right, well, that's like the worst segue ever, but whatever. Open segment. Let's get to it. This is FactoryCon week for you and Rob. Chris is like, why do I work with these guys, man? They tell me particularly Malone, man. He tells me he's a professional. Then he comes out and he sounds like a blubbering idiot on the microphone. So it's FactoryCon week. You and Kevin are going to be there. I am not sure if he is en route to that just yet. If not, I think he'll be there in the morning. But big week. I hate it that I'm going to miss that with you guys this week. But for those of us who would like to dream about being at FactoryCon, what are you guys going to be up to over the next few days, man?
Well, for me, basically, I'm structuring my days the way I really kind of wanna, in the sense that I'm going to be doing a lot of work. I'm going to get up. I'm going to work. Mark Stallings is in the same cabin as I am, and we're going to sit here on the patio or in the if it's bad weather, in the cabin, and we're going to work. And then after we're done working, we're going to go hang out with friends. Like right now, after we finish recording this, we're recording this on Tuesday. I just got here today. I'm going to go hang out with some of the crew that's already here and have a few pops of some sort or another and enjoy seeing my friends. And so a lot of work is going to get done this week. We're going to do a bunch of writing sprints, and we're going to do a bunch of, other catch-up stuff. And, this is in many ways a bit of a writer retreat for me. And then the con part, a lot of the con part really starts on Friday and Saturday. And then we'll do like a lot of the social stuff. And then we have a few more days to do, again, a bit of a writing retreat. And so for me, this is designed to be a really productive thing. Everybody's coming here to kind of relax and be around other, our friends who are writers, right, and try and see what we'll do. I've got a variety of projects I'm going to be pitching people to try and write in, and pushing. Obviously I was giving Casey hell for not getting me that novel in that setting he started. But I mean, it's not so much giving other authors hell as, hey, this would be a good time for that to come to me, kind of thing. And I've got some anthologies I want to make sure we get some stories for, and all sorts of things. This is an extended version, in some ways, of the first night at LibertyCon. And the first night at LibertyCon, the Thursday night, sitting in the bar, there's so many stories that get plotted, so many ideas that get thrown out, so many collaborations and plans made for the year or 2 years upcoming, and there's going to be a lot of that. So there you go, a lot of work and a lot of fun. It's best of both worlds.
Nice. Well, I'm going to be hanging out back down here in Florida, just kicking it the 80-degree weather and enjoying myself. Still in the process of buying a house. Thankfully, that seems to be coming to a close. Man, housing. Adulting, it's just a thing, people. But in the meantime, I have actually begun to, and this is, I guess, a little bit of news from Malone Land. I think I am starting to circle in on what my next project is going to be. And not quite ready to reveal what that is just yet. It's still kind of in the infancy stage. But this is going to be a little bit of a different thing for me. It will be writing in a universe that everybody who listens to this program knows. And I'm really going to get to delve into my old skills as a sports writer on this. And it's nice. It's sci-fi. We're going to have spaceships and all that kind of stuff. But there is a sport in a very well-known CKP series that's been referenced on numerous occasions. It's readers of that series know it well, but we've never actually met the sport. And so what I've been noodling around the last few days and last week or so is, right, how do we flesh that out? How do we build a sport? What does this look like? If we're going to take readers and we're going to put them on the field for this, what does it look like? What are the rules? Who are the players? What's the strategy? How does this actually work right in front of people? And then how do we tell a compelling story out of this? Because, I mean, obviously sci-fi fans are sports fans too. That's why they listen to this show. But, I mean, nobody wants to read a, CBS Sports article in their sci-fi novel. You got to give them a story. It's got to have characters. It's got to have people. You got tales to tell. And so that's kind of what I'm in the process of mulling over now. So it's a very different style of world building for me. I'm not necessarily building worlds and ships and all that. The foundation has been laid for that. But really getting into the weeds to create something that makes sense on the page to sci-fi fans and to those of us who are sports fans. It's very easy for us to read that stuff. And Rob, you and I have been on panels at cons about this stuff. When you read bad sports and books, it sucks. Like you put the book down and get your money back. And that's what we want to avoid here. So and
to follow up, one of the things that irritates the heck out of me is modern assumptions about sports being a modern thing. And having done a bunch of studies on the histories of sports, they go back way farther than people realize. Baseball is way older than a lot of people will think. I mean, the first professional sports league I know of is like 1610, and that's in England. So, I mean, and that's a cricket, actually. That's the first professional sports league. The first baseball I know of is somewhere in the 10th century in England, and I only say it because that's the one we can point at, not real evidence that that's when it started. So sports are much older than a lot of times we remember. So and from being new mythology, it's important to me that if we're going to do medieval fantasy, that we get some of these sports in there. So it's got to get that right, because it bothers me if we don't get some of these things right, even if it's fantasy novel.
Yep.
So
absolutely. So hope to have some more details on that coming out, next several weeks. Again, just kind of noodling around the nuts and bolts of how the sport itself is going to work, and then also what kind of story we're going to tell. And I think we're getting pretty close on that, so hopefully should have something official to announce coming up in the near future. But that's what I've been working on. All right, without further ado, let's.
And actually, I wanted to circle back. Sorry to interrupt, Ian,
Yeah.
but I wanted to circle back. So yes, I'm at FactoryCon. That's what I'm doing at FactoryCon. But I got a whole bunch of things going on with new mythology. I want to touch base on the House Between Worlds. John Osborne's fourth book in his Elysian Accord series releases a week from today. It is amazing, and the cover is gorgeous, done by Alexander Ito. I'm probably butchering his name, but it's beautiful, beautiful cover, and the story is worth it. The story is up to that level. It's really a fantastic story, and John has always been a good writer. He is getting better everything he does. And then following that, Talons and Talismans is coming right on the heels of it. Talons and Talismans 2 is coming right on the heels of it. So that's coming. And then a month from 6 weeks, the Eldros Legacy project that we've been talking about officially begins. We're actually going to have a bunch of Eldros Legacy stories in Talons and Talismans 2. Then the Eldros Legacy officially begins on the 7th of December, and this is going to be pretty special project, and it starts with Khyven the Unkillable by Todd Fonstock. So we've got a number of things coming up in new mythology that I'm really excited about. So
Nice.
I want to make sure that you guys hear all that.
Yeah, I just saw the cover for House Between Worlds online the other day. That is a gorgeous cover. And folks, you can obviously catch all of this stuff in the CKP groups there on Facebook. But if you really want a direct line to what's happening with New Mythology Press specifically, Rob has set up a MeWe group over there. So, if you're on MeWe, great. There's a lot of us who really like it over there. I'm a big fan of that platform because there's no algorithm for your newsfeed. So when you go follow somebody, if they post something, you see it, as long as you want to scroll chronologically. Doesn't matter if it's a person, if it's a page, if it's a group or an event. There's no manipulation because it's not an ads-based platform. They make their money by subscription. So if you're a business and you launch a page over there, you got to pay $1.99 for that per month. And that's fair. But the nice thing about that for us as users is it means we don't have to sift through all that crap. Like, we actually get the content that we're telling them we want to see this. So, back to the point, if you're a New Mythology fan, you can have a direct line to all of that happening right over there. And then obviously by following Rob on social media, he's going to keep you posted on all of that. But, okay.
Yeah.
Quick plug there for the MeWe group.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Yeah, man. All right, let's see what the listeners got to say, shall we?
Absolutely.
You got mail.
Okay, first question comes to us from Eddie. Hey, fellas, I got to admit to having been a little bit underwhelmed by the new The Batman trailer that came out this week. To me, it looked a lot like the Nolan trilogy, and honestly, that's a little bit of a bummer. I like Matt Reeves as a director, and I think he'll do okay on this in the end, but as it stands right now, I got to tell you, my expectations for this one have been tempered a bit by what I saw in the footage. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I'll be frankly honest with you, dude. I don't have a whole lot of faith in anything coming out of DC. I don't know what's going on over there, but none of the stories that they seem to be cranking out are terribly interesting. If you look on the film front, they've made a complete mess out of just about everything that they have. Wonder Woman, they did a great job with, and then they absolutely crapped the bed in 1984. Suicide Squad was just basically a ripoff of Guardians of the Galaxy with superheroes and some more F-bombs. You got the Batman with Pattinson. Maybe it'll be okay. I'm told the story on this one is going to be very much a crime thriller, unlike anything we've ever seen before in a Batman film. They're really going to weigh on that, the world's greatest detective moniker. That's what this is meant to be. And I hope that they do, because that will be different. But yeah, in looking at the footage, it's like, this just looks like the last 3 Batman films I've seen. And I just don't, whatever. With a skinnier Batman and a lighter voice, because it's Robert Pattinson. So, whatever. I might see it. If it's free on HBO Max, I'll probably give it a shot, but I'm not lining up at the theater for this one, no.
I will say this, that if it turns out that it really is a crime drama, like it is, basically falls into the noir, Maltese Falcon sort of riff, which I would love to see them do some of that with Batman,
Right.
and play into the dark, the dark mystery and the dark kind of Raymond Chandler style characters. I'd love it, but I'm not going to go watch it in the movie. I mean, there's a bunch of things I'd rather go watch, and I haven't even gone to see them, so I'm not going to go watch it in the movie.
Well, again, I don't have any faith in Warner's and DC. I mean, they have shown they have a legacy over there of screwing with films. You look at what they did to Justice League with Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon. You look at what they did to the Wonder Woman franchise. You look at what they did to Superman, and how they wasted that character with what I thought. I thought Henry Cavill could have been a great Superman with the right script, and they wasted him.
Yeah.
You date back to the 90s with Tim Burton and Val Kilmer and all of those guys, and you read the stories about how the studios just constantly stepped in and screwed with the directors and the storytellers' ability to do their jobs, and that's why most DC films are pure garbage. So, that was what made the Christopher Nolan trilogy such a revelation, was they just let him tell a cool Batman story, and it was awesome. But that's the only property I've ever seen that they let people do that.
The story has to come first, and they've forgotten that. It's all about various other things, and none of it is relevant to the story. So it seems to me.
All right, next question comes to us from Malcolm. It's official, Ed Orgeron is out at LSU. Was this a surprise to you guys? And who are some of the other names that you think could be following him out the door at year's end? I mean, it wasn't a surprise. Anybody who followed LSU football knew Edo was on thin ice coming into this year. The way they've looked, the Florida game notwithstanding, they had real problems. So clearly they want to move on. Apparently there's been some other stuff off the field that may have led to that early dismissal. I can't speak to any of that crap because I wasn't there and I don't know the facts. And frankly, we got enough people who love to, speculate on all that and tabloid out and none of them were there, and none of them know the facts of the case. So I'm content to let the investigation run its course on that, and then I'll read it when it's over, and we'll make a decision. As it stands, his resume alone, wins and losses the last few years, was grounds enough to let him go. I hate it because he was a Louisiana guy, and him winning a national championship a few years was a great story.
But it's not a few years ago. Not a few years ago. It's 21 months. Less than 2 years after winning a national title, he's out. I actually am surprised. Now, I understand. If I just go off of wins and losses and the way they looked on the field, it's been wretched. But there's been one coach in recent history that's won them a national title. And usually that gets you a little bit of leeway. And it doesn't look like they did. And I am surprised also because you mentioned he's a Louisiana boy, and it was in many ways perfect for LSU. It smacks to me a little bit of, we won it all with perfect Louisiana boy. Now we kind of want to change our image and get away from this, strange talking, strange accented dude who is, not this. He's not very 21st century kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know again. I don't know the off the field stuff, and that could trump any of this. But I have to say, they've looked bad the last couple of years. And so, did you see the players that got drafted from that championship team? Did you look at the loss of talent from that championship team? But he hasn't been able to rebuild it. Simply said, LSU isn't Alabama. Who is Alabama other than Alabama? Mm-hmm. There isn't anyone. So I guess to me that's where I would go. But again, that off the field stuff's a wild card here that we can't really go off of.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Ed O, listen, rightfully, I believe he's drawn a lot of comparisons to Gene Chizik down at Auburn, a guy who was absolutely horrible, and then hired the right offensive coordinator at the right time and got a superstar quarterback and rode that all the way to a national championship. And then both of those guys were left, and he went back to doing a whole bunch of sucking. And you can't do that when you've got the level of money and cachet that you have at a school like Auburn or LSU. And that's very much the Orgeron legacy. I mean, he was butt sorry as a coach prior to Joe Brady is it Joe Brady, Jeff Brady, Joe Brady, offensive coordinator in Carolina now. Yeah, Joe Brady and then Joe Burrow. So those guys leave, and you're right back to sucking. So I hate it for them, but I mean, I'm not going to begrudge LSU for making this move now. I mean, with the early signing period being what it is now, kids who are getting ready to sign in December want to know who their coach is going to be, and you just gave yourself essentially a month and a half jump to be able to get started on that search process. So I don't blame them for that.
Now the timing doesn't bother me in that sense. You're right. You get that chance at the early signing period. You absolutely get to push a new offense, defense, whatever that the new guy's going to have, and you do get that head start. I had zero problem with that. I really don't have a problem with it. I'm just a little surprised that, his legacy may very well be as a bad coach helped by others, but he was smart enough to hire Brady.
Sure.
He was good enough to recruit Burrow, and whoever was the one that did the work to turn Burrow into what he is now, which is a more than competent, a good NFL quarterback, because he wasn't when he was a freshman, and he wasn't when he was, much younger in his career. What he was as a sophomore, as I recall, was not even that good at the collegiate level, and then he had a fantastic, and it was changes in his footwork, changes in his processing, and
it was a change of venue, change of scenery. He started at Michigan and then transferred to LSU to be coached by Joe Brady. So, I think, and I'm not going to be surprised at all if we see them follow the Auburn formula. When Auburn fired Chiswick, who'd they go get? Gus Malzahn, the offensive coordinator who made Cam Newton the phenomena that he was. So don't be surprised. And Joe Brady's a very hot coaching name in the NFL and the collegiate ranks. You can bet. I mean, any opening that comes open now, his name is going to be mentioned. And he was, if I had to wager it, I'd say he was probably the first call that they made. And, for a lot of reasons. He obviously has the ties to LSU, but also because he's in the NFL, if he decides he's going to make a move, they can do that now. And, you're not tampering with another college coach. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Other people who could be on the hot seat moving out. I mean, obviously you got to look at Manny Diaz down in Miami. It's they're officially on quit watch down in Miami. You lose a heartbreaker last week to North Carolina. You got Derek King is out now, although they seem to be fairly high on this Van Dyke kid. We'll see how that plays out. I don't know that Miami can afford to fire Manny Diaz, but if they go straight into the tank by the end of this year, I think the end could be nigh for the Diaz area. Lord knows they're already hemorrhaging recruits. Other people that could be on the way out.
I don't know his name because I'm not a huge fan of Tennessee football, but it strikes me there's been some upheaval at Tennessee of late, and that wouldn't surprise me if there's going to be some, because there's
nobody's going anywhere in Tennessee, dude. They fired Lane Kiffin after 1 year. They've been paying for it ever since. Or actually, he left after 1 year, and they have been scrambling ever since to try and fix that. They just hired the athletic director from University of Central Florida and UCF's head coach, Josh Heupel, former Heisman Trophy winner at Oklahoma. He's only been there 6 months, so they're not going to fire him after a year.
Well, that's probably that's a good point.
He inherited a program in an absolute shambles in Knoxville. So
it is an absolute shambles. That's
Tennessee and Florida State are in the same boat. It's a full rebuild from the ground up. There is nothing left in the cupboard for the coaches who inherited those programs, Mike Norvell or Josh Heupel. They are garbage. They have garbage talent. They're not any good, and it's going to take time. And then, by the way, a pandemic, so no installs, no camps, no nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there. So I think he'll be fine at Tennessee. Other people I'm looking at, I don't know what's going on out at UCLA. I don't know how they're feeling about Chip Kelly these days. That's going to be interesting to watch. Couple of coaches that I think could be on the move, although not necessarily for firings, but just because I think they're good coaches. Dave Clawson out at Wake Forest is a guy that I really like a lot. When Florida State's job came open, he was the guy that I wanted. I like a coach that has worked their way up through the ranks from FCS up into Power 5, and then they go to kind of a smaller, lower-end Power 5 school, and they turn chicken crap into chicken salad. And, nobody expects a team like Wake Forest to be a competitive team. We still don't expect they're going to contend for a title this year, but they're a good squad, and they play hard, and they play mistake-free football. They know their assignments. They are well coached, and if you show up and take them for granted, they'll kick your ass. And they are arguably the best team in the ACC Atlantic this year because he's a really, really good coach. So the next, step in the trajectory for him would be now you get a look for the big jobs. So,
sure.
Let's say if a Florida were to open up because Dan Mullen decides I'm tired of college athletics, I'm going to head to the NFL and just be an offensive coordinator and cash a check. I would expect that a guy like a Dave Clawson would very much be on the radar for that ilk of job. Another guy I'm looking at for that would be a Mark Stoops. What do you really expect out of Kentucky football? And they're winning football games under him.
Oh,
Again,
Kentucky looks amazing.
Getting max results out of mid-tier talent in a program. That's what you do when you're a good coach. So I expect those guys to be moving on to maybe greener pastures because of their successes. But all right, next question.
Kentucky.
Go ahead.
Kentucky looked really good for longer than other teams have looked this year against Georgia, to be honest. And the final score was a hefty difference. But I was watching a little bit of the first quarter and a half, and for a while there they were holding their own.
Yep, no doubt.
I was impressed.
All right, next question comes to us from Mark. I saw on Facebook the other day where Kevin Eikenberry is now creating an ongoing thread, filling it with music that he listened to or was inspired by when he was writing Harbinger. Great idea. Would you guys consider of doing something similar? Rob, we talk a lot about music. I've got thoughts on this, but I've taken point on the last two questions. So how about you, man? You think about maybe doing something like this for readers?
I never have thought about it yet, but with this question, I have now. And, let's, rather than duplicate what Eikenberry's doing, I would focus on what would I start with as a writing or a theme stuff for fantasy, if you're going to do that. And where I would start is the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack by Basil Polidorus. I've mentioned it here before. It is a brilliant score, and it is wonderful for fantasy. I actually do use it to listen to help me, help push me. For me, the ones that I want that I really listen to when I'm writing are instrumentals. Yeah. So there are, another one that comes to mind is Gustav Holst's The Planets, especially Mars. Then there's a number of other classical and orchestral things that come to mind. But then I also listen to a bunch of rock instrumentals. Of course, Rush has La Via Strangiato and YYZ and Malignant Narcissism and Main Monkey Business, and these are really good writing songs. And Frankenstein by the Edgar Winter Group jumps to mind too. So things that have intricate music that I don't necessarily have to pay attention to the lyrics. There's a lot of Rush for me on that. Would come to mind where the music and the sort of epic flow of the music would push me into writing fantasy. Now I'm writing medieval fantasy. That I suspect that would change a little bit. Like if I wanted to write something more in a modern fantasy setting, I might very well be pushing myself to listen to techno or something like that. That would seem to match maybe, say, a Shadowrun style story as opposed to, medieval fantasy. But yeah, I would start with Basil Polidorus' score for Conan the Barbarian. It is simply a beautiful, beautiful set of music.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of have my own take on this. I release quote unquote official soundtracks for all of my books, and these are Spotify playlists that have music that I either listen to when I wrote that particular story, or just stuff that makes me think about, that would remind me. Terry Van Zandt would jam out to this, or Trip Hackett would listen to this on a road trip, or Lee Summerson would play this while he's flying a Mako, or whatever. And so you can go find all of those, and they all kind of have their own different flavor. The Mako stuff is going to be a bit more Van Halen and Queensryche and U2, so on and so forth. Your Freebird Rising, Street Survivor stuff is going to be Leonard Skinner, Allman Brothers, Doobie Brothers, that sort of thing. Detriment City Vice is totally different than all of it. That's going to be a lot of techno. It's the Crystal Method. It's Massive Attack. It's, all of, the Prodigy, all of that kind of stuff. So, whatever I'm listening to when I write, I just throw it together in a Spotify playlist and slap a title on it and open it up to the public, and you can go check it out. And the nice thing about Spotify, too, is it's the actual tracks. You don't have to have a paid account. You can listen to those playlists for free, as long as you don't mind an ad every 20 minutes or so. They're going to play that for you. But anyway, just go onto Spotify and search for Ian J. Malone, and there you go. I also put them up on social media from time to time, so you can find them there, too. All right, final question comes to us from Garrett. In light of your interview tonight with Casey Moores and what with all the 80s nostalgia hubbub that's been flying around his social media lately, that got me to thinking, who were you guys' favorite action superheroes from the 80s and 90s? Please opine. Rob, I'll give you a lead on this one as well, man. Back in the 80s, 90s, we had a lot of them, from Stallone to Van Damme to Arnie to Chuck Norris to you name it. Did you have any favorites?
Well, Arnie absolutely is up there. He was surprisingly good at getting you to enjoy his character as a character, as well as being Mr. Badass. I mean, compared to some of the very shallow stuff, you look at I'm thinking the name. What's the movie where he has his mind implanted and he's on Mars?
Total Recall.
Total Recall. Yeah, like that. That's a surprisingly subtle movie at times.
Yeah.
And he does a really good job with it. He's a lot more intelligent than a lot of people realize when he first started doing this, because, he had the accent and he was this big dumb athlete and so on and so forth. And yet I look at Arnie and I see a bunch of things he's done. Twins was fun as well.
They're doing a sequel to that one, by the way. Buckle up for Twins 2. I saw the pictures.
Perfect.
Yep, that's coming.
I like Chuck Norris quite a bit. Walker Texas Ranger is a bit of comfort food. I mean, you know exactly what's going to happen in every one of the episodes. But then when I pop out a thing of Kraft macaroni and cheese, I know exactly what I'm getting. I know I'm not getting anything that's great for me or anything like that. But it's tasty, and so there's a lot of Chuck Norris. I really enjoyed the Riggs Murtaugh dynamic from Lethal Weapon, and you gotta look at John McClane as a character, fun character. I mean, they've done Die Hard too much, but what a fun character! Sure. And that first movie really is a classic.
I would argue the second one was a lot of fun too, man.
Yeah. I mean, not sitting there. They were, I'm saying we're in what, Die Hard 89 or something like that. But
right. John McClane as Walker.
I will say this: it's not an 80s one, but it's kind of a spoof on the 80s one. Red is one of my favorite.
Oh yeah, those are
action
fun movies. Yeah,
those are excellent movies. So.
Yeah. Well, that was what made the Expendables so much fun when the first one came out. Like, I can remember sitting in the bar, and one of the bartenders, a buddy of mine named Pony, was just like, you heard about the Expendables, right? I was like, the what? He's like, new movie coming out. It's a new Stallone flick. I'm like, oh, Sly's got a new movie coming out, huh? He's like, oh, it's not just Sly. And he started rattling off the names. And then I saw the first teaser poster for that film, and it said, some action movies have stars. This action movie has all of them. I was just like, oh, yes. Yes, I'm so going to watch. And I love the Expendables films just for that reason. They are your perfect Kraft macaroni and cheese. There's nothing fancy about them whatsoever, but they're just so good to watch, Yeah. As far as my favorites, I was a big Sly fan. I love the Rocky movies. I used to run around in my yard out in the sticks in Lafayette County, Florida, with a water gun Uzi playing John Rambo. Had the headband and everything. Anytime we went to either Tallahassee or Gainesville, I made my dad take me to the Army Navy store because I wanted to get stuff for Rambo costumes and all that. So I was a big Sly fan. Also loved Arnie. I mean, you cannot go wrong with Predator. That's one of my favorite sci-fi action films of all time. Again, Bruce Willis, Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Mel Gibson, you can't go wrong with those. God, who else? Who have we not named? I will admit.
Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan was fun. I will admit that I did watch my fair share of Jean-Claude Van Damme films back in the day. My man had a mean roundhouse. When you're 12, it's freaking awesome to see. Time Cop was a fun one. Uber cheesy, horrible film, but it was good. So I can go on for days. Then there was this guy named Indiana Jones, and he wasn't half bad either. I don't know if you throw him into action star ilk, but still a fun one to watch. I hate the fact that they're making an Indy 5. That's going to be awful, but it is what it is. So, alrighty, well, thanks everybody for your questions. This is definitely running long, so we're going to go ahead and kick it into White Flag.
White Flag.
Lots of good stuff on the radar coming up here in the next couple of weeks for me. As mentioned before, I hope to be buying and moving into a house. Really excited about that. In case you guys haven't noticed the last few episodes, there's a little bit of an echo behind my voice. That's because I'm recording in a giant tin can called a townhouse with hardwood floors everywhere. And it sucks, and I can't wait to get out of here. So you want to know what's on my radar? Actual housing that doesn't suck. Big fan. Other stuff coming down the pike. I will admit I had really not a whole lot of desire to see Ghostbusters Afterlife. I just kind of thought that was yet another cheap grab at nostalgia, another buck for old movies, old nostalgia. But the more I'm hearing about it and the more I'm learning about the story that they're going to tell in that one, it's being directed by the son of the guy who created the original franchise, Ivan Reitman. It's his son, Jason, who's doing all this. So, it sounds like if you were a fan of Ghostbusters, and Kevin Eikenberry, if you're listening, I know you were, this is the film that you really wanted to see. Like, this is a story that you've really waited a long time to be able to go watch. So I didn't think I'd say that, particularly not openly in a public forum, but Ghostbusters Afterlife, it's kind of on my radar. I really want to check it out. And then lastly, I'm really looking forward to checking out the audiobook from the Street Survivors again because, they did a great job and I'm going to go listen to it. Street Survivors, Ian Malone, Chris Kennedy, available now on Audible, iTunes, wherever audiobooks are sold. So, Rob, what do you got going on?
Well, like I said, I've been talking about all the great stuff coming out at New Mythology, like John Osborne's House Between Worlds, which I'm really pleased to be a part of. For me, I've been doing a bunch of writing late. I've been working on The Door into Winter, which will be my next Eldritch Legacy novel. It's about 20,000 words, and hopefully I'll leave here somewhere in the mid-30s. That's my goal when I leave FactoryCon. But a lot of what I'm thinking of right now is I get to spend the next week or so with a bunch of cool writers, get to talk about the business, get to spend time with fans, get to really enjoy and remember what this business is all about, which is people and getting to interact with actual real humans, and I'm excited. So
most definitely. So, all righty, folks. Well, thanks again to Casey Moores for coming on the show tonight and sharing a little bit about his history as a writer and all the cool stuff he's got on deck right now. Go check him out, man. CaseyMoores.net. He has got everything you're looking for, plus some fantastic stories to tell as well. Go find him on Facebook. Follow his stuff. He is worth your time. Also, want to say thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Chris Kennedy Publishing. If you want to know more about what's happening in their world, be it military, sci-fi, space opera, fantasy, whatever, New Mythology Press, go check it out, chriskennedypublishing.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, MeWe, all the usual suspects. If you like this show, please leave us some stars, folks. 5 preferably. It doesn't matter where you listen. Ratings always help to push us up the ranks so other people can find this program, get new listeners. Until next time, I am Ian Malone. He is Rob Howell, Kevin Steverson. Hope it all went well, buddy. Listeners, we'll see you next time on the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. See ya.
I hope you had fun. Thanks for participating.
I mean, we never had the chance to talk about Buff Orpington because you threw me with that Casey question, but otherwise,
Wait,
I'm not just any asshole, right?
Real quick while we've got you here, Buff Orpington. Where did you guys come up with that?
I'm not sure if the person who originated it wants to be named, but basically on one of our group chats, somebody mentioned the fact that it brought up a picture of a Buff Orpington chicken, and the funny thing is, I have this recollection of it being me who thought of this, but apparently it was somebody else because I've seen the original posts, so that was just me being a jerk. But somebody else posted that sounds like the name of an 80s action hero. So from that, my mind went away sprinting.
Right.
And I kind of carried this a little bit too far to the point where I feel like I need to find a graphic artist and create a series of graphic novels or something that make this real to life. But I originally came up with the first joking title of Buff Orpington and the Campbell Chicks of Cancun, and I pulled the character Tara Mason, who goes by the moniker of Death Angel from Kevin Eikenberry's Death Angel, and I turned her into Angel Pettymore, which, Pettymore means orgasm in French. And so I sort of ran away going through, and then I mentioned this to Jamie Ibsen. Together we basically started looking at some of the covers and going through some of the different books, the Four Horsemen books. Made this directly relate to the Four Horsemen, and sometimes it was a little bit of a stretch, but we tied it to the Four Horsemen.
You did a good job on mine.
Yeah, at some point I started going to some of the individual authors who had a series within the Four Horsemen that was running, and so we turned Spartan Specialist into the talented technicians of Trojans Tacticians. And what did we do for you, Rob? The Arboreal Irregulars?
Yeah, something like that. It was hilarious.
Of the Arboreal Irregulars. And we'd come up with some spoof sort of Bond-esque name, Kitty Bon Muff, and things like that. And so I created this whole list of titles with some buff girls, and then we were playing. That's actually in an appendix at the end of Unshackled. And then sometime a few weeks early, we were like, we need to do more with this. And Jamie Ibsen started taking covers, the original art covers from the Four Horsemen novels, put a cartoon filter over them, and threw this Indiana Jones-esque Buff Orpington title in there. And then we put the title of the actual movie. So it was Buff Orpington and the Cannibal Chicks of Cancun, featuring Angel Pettymore. And we then ran away and created one for every title, and then we decided we had to do something with that, and so that became sort of our big publicity stunt. And the run up to the launch of Unshackled was on a day, I think it was 3 or 4 times a day, we were putting out one of these with this little stupid blurb about how the making of this movie and how this they run up the extravagant costs trying to build a real live replica of an actual robot, or they used actual tortantulas and the company only suffered 18% casualties or something like that.
That is awesome.
So yeah, we had way too much fun for those 3 weeks.
You know what would be kick ass, man? And I mean this. You guys should, if you want to do this, take this idea and run like hell with it. There are gazillions of sites out there that do like print on demand stuff, whether it's shirts or hats or t-shirts or whatever. Like, you should totally collect all of those film covers and make like a Buff Orpington calendar. And every month is one of the different film covers from one of the movies and stuff. You could give those things away at cons.
I think Jamie actually talked about that. Yeah,
dude, there's like an endless supply of that. I mean, seriously. I mean, how, as authors, when we get out to cons, like, we're scrambling to try and market our stuff, and we're all scrambling to try and do something different, be memorable, so that people remember us and want to grab our books over the other guys. That's something that is completely and totally innovative. And when I interviewed Jamie for one of the CKP Confidential segments on Patreon, that was when you guys were first getting ready to roll that one out. And he sent me the one with Taylor Van Zant and the Swamp Eagle security guys on it. And I was like, that is the greatest, because I totally picked up right out of the gate on the Indiana Jones stuff and all that. I was like, that's fantastic.
How'd you like my blurb for that one?
Oh, that was nice. That was very sweet. So listen, man, we got to record the back half of this show, so I'm going to let you go. But
right.
Definitely thanks for coming on in, man. It was definitely fun chatting with you.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.